Hello, my name is Joshua COFFIE, and I'm a PhD student at CU Boulder's Atlas Institute in the Emergent Nanomaterials Lab, where I develop tattooable smart inks. I applied to the Department of Defense's National Defense Science and Engineering Fellowship Program, or the DoD NDSEG, established in 1981, for the Research Methods Final Project, and I wanted to take a few moments to tell you about the fellowship, what the process is like, and address some of the lessons I learned along the way during my application. Please keep in mind I have not been awarded this fellowship, but I will be walking you through what I've learned throughout the application process. Awards will not post until April or May of 2025. The DoD NDSEG Fellowship is designed to increase the number of U.S. citizens trained in science and engineering roles in fields that are particularly important for national defense. To be eligible, candidates must be U.S. citizens, have completed an undergraduate degree, are enrolled in a U.S. graduate institute, have at least 3 years remaining in their program, and are pursuing research that aligns with a topic in the Department of Defense's broad agency announcements. What are BAAs, you ask? Well, they are announcements of government funding and investment in a particular focus or research area, often promoting both public health as a whole and national defense interests simultaneously. To apply to the fellowship, your work must align with one of these BAAs applied by the program sponsors, either the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, the Army Research Office, or the Office of Naval Research. These BAAs outline the purpose of the funding, how many projects will be funded, at what rate, and how long the funding will continue. The fellowship as a whole is a highly competitive program, as there are only 100 to 150 fellows awarded each year, which is about a 6% success rate. The award is 3 years of full tuition and mandatory fees, a monthly stipend, medical insurance coverage for up to $1,600 per year through the institution, and additional opportunities for mentorship and networking each year. Well, why would I do this, you ask? Do I get to double dip in funding and make bank as a student? What if I apply to all the fellowships? If your eyebrows lifted at this comment, warning, be prepared for a serious letdown at that answer. Many fellowships won't allow you to accept more than one. A good example would be the National Science Foundation and Department of Defense. If you won both, you'd have to accept only one. And funds from your program that were previously earmarked for you will go back into your lab pot for more research. Yay! Honestly, the answer comes down to what I want to do with the rest of my life. Many people applying for this fellowship or pursuing PhDs in the Atlas program as a whole will be entering their first career, maybe their second. In contrast, I will enter my third career, following medical retirement as a captain from the U.S. Army, where I joined at the age of 17 in military intelligence. And then I spent a decade working in management consulting following. My goal is to eventually direct an institute like our very own Atlas Institute, and to prepare myself for a lab director role. That's a really good first step in that endeavor. Acceptance into a fellowship also demonstrates the ability to secure funding. It shows that you have credentials secure enough to convince a reviewer, at least, and that you're reliably sufficient to earmark a year's worth of funding for your research idea. Obtaining funding also means you're likely to secure more funds, as prior awards can impact future success. A good word of advice I heard once was, if you qualify for the funding, it's in your research area, and you have the time, don't pass it up. Particularly if you already have all the materials together to create the proposal and really just need to format it before submission. Okay, enough about the fellowship application or proposal, conceptually if you will. Let's talk about what it required for this class. Part of this fellowship is a 3-page proposal, with an additional page allowed for references. This proposal outlines how your 3 years of funding will be spent, and that was the assignment I focused on for the class. Here are a couple of things I learned throughout the process. Number 1, think of the reviewers as investors. They want your projects to be successful, so the higher degree of likelihood that an idea is to succeed, the likelier it is to be funded. This is a good guiding principle for funding applications in general. Your proposals should look like there wasn't enough space to put everything down because you know your work so well. Every bit of white space taken up, the idea is thoroughly documented as possible. Figures and data from preliminary findings will only further support the likelihood of success and the likelihood of an award. Number 2, find the right idea. My first draft was sent back from my advisor with a note that started with, "So it seems like you're on your first draft." Anyway, the important point behind this one is that your idea needs to be feasible, novel, likely to succeed, and still pushing the envelope simultaneously. Not the easiest list of requirements. That's where as much feedback on the idea as possible is helpful, and pictures really are worth 1,000 words. I batted around 2 different proposals myself, effectively doubling the workload required for submission, and eventually landed on the idea that I presented in my proposal. Which brings me to my third learning point. Pictures are worth 1,000 words, particularly in academia. When you're short on space to put information and have a limited word count, a figure can be your saving grace. It will give you a chance to illustrate a concept with less likelihood for misinterpretation, while also giving your reviewers confidence that you've spent enough time with the idea that you are able to build a conceptual drawing to support it. And finally, learning point 4 from this proposal and fellowship application process. Use the tools at your disposal. We all might have different thoughts on AI and its usefulness, but when it comes to funding, there is no greater advocate. By loading in your prior funding submissions, the requirements of this particular grant or fellowship, and your outline for how you would like to respond, you can use the assistance of artificial intelligence and machine learning to produce a scaffold for your work in your own voice, using your prior work as a reference, all aligned to the formatting and structure of the award requirements, giving you more time to focus on the concept, aims, and goals instead of formatting, wordsmithing, or attempting to overcome writer's block. A word of caution on this one though, I'm not suggesting you hire ChatGPT to do your work, but it would be silly not to use all the resources you have at your disposal to secure funding. Also, please ensure that any fellowship or grant that you apply to, that if they have a requirement for any references for assistance with using AI, that you follow that appropriately. Okay, so let's wrap this one up. Why would I go after a fellowship like this, or why would someone do that to themselves? Well, number one, you're self-funded, so you don't have to play the surprise you have no money this semester game, which I have seen happen to our classmates in the past, and not something I'm really eager to look forward to, particularly having a family and at this stage of my life. Number two, if there's a divergence between your study interest and your lab's direction, that research can still survive and shift appropriately. So if funding changes within the lab, your idea is no longer funded, well, you're self-funded and you can continue with your work. And then finally, expansion. My goal is to run an institute like Atlas one day. The way I demonstrate that ability is to complete my research well, while also growing the undergraduate and graduate team that supports my work. More funding equals more research, which equals more equipment and more people to come up with more creative solutions to life's problems, thereby growing our own research entity into this field of interest. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a great Christmas.